Hello tacticians, today we're going to be looking at Marshal Drier, the latest addition to the Imperial Guard. And whilst he's cool, is he any good? As always, just a quick thank you to everyone who supports the channel, whether it's through subscribing or use my friend code, as it really does help me out. And also remember, every 1,000 subs gets that new community code for character shards. So there's a win-win. And talking about winning, does Marshal Drier win? Well, let's carry on and find out. First up, he has the resilient trait, which means he's not going to be killed that easily, and that goes very nicely indeed with his passive trait, which we'll look at in just a bit. And secondly, he is unstoppable, which I suppose isn't too surprising. He is indeed riding on a murder horse. Now, if any of you out there have played the tabletop, we all know that the mounts are more deadly than the riders. Unfortunately, this is just one character, so we'll just have to pretend that the horse is doing all the hard work. He doesn't have a ranged attack, which might be considered a negative, but he does have a movement of 4, so he can charge into combat and hit them with that power weapon of his. So let's have a look at his stats at various breakpoints. So if we start just by looking at his stats, he's not a million miles away from what Commissar Yarrick would be with regards to health, armour and damage. He has the same 3 power sword hits, and obviously Yarrick has a bolter. Compared to this guy, he has no ranged weapons. Drier can obviously move 4, Yarrick's stuck moving 3, so there are slightly different roles there. They're also similar in their active ability, where they both bring in summons. However, Drier's is a bit more interesting, because if he hasn't moved, he'll gain Infiltrate until the end of the turn, and then charges an enemy target that has a free adjacent hex within that movement range of 4. He'll then deal power damage to it, and then in come his Death Rider summons, who are a little bit tougher than normal Imperial Guardsmen. They can also immediately attack enemies that are within range. Bear in mind, those summons are also only melee summons. They don't shoot las guns at anyone. However, all of these attacks, triggered by this ability, have additional pierce ratio for each friendly unit that has been defeated in battle. So he's not really a replacement for Yarrick, but rather another way to increase how much damage your Imperial Guard can put out by sacrificing a bunch in the first place. He's also tough to kill, so not only does he have that resilient trait, he also regenerates health as well at the beginning of his turn, and all attacks against Drier have less crit chance and deal less crit damage. Now, it would have been nice if that extended to his summons, but I guess we can't have everything. So let's have a look at him on the battlefield, and I'll give my summarising thoughts at the end of this video. So the first thing that I would like to look at is, how did these new Death Riders compare to the old Imperial Guardsmen? So if we choose Commissar Yarrick and have a look at the Send in the Next Wave, where he summons in his Cadian Guardsmen, you can see that the Death Riders do have slightly more health, damage and armour. Now this is being shown at the rarity, obviously at Epic and Legendary. If we ever get there for PvP, the ratio is going to be more or less the same. So these Death Riders are better summons, but you don't always get more of them. The other thing to bear in mind with Creed, his active ability only affects Cadian Guardsmen within 2 hexes. So unfortunately, if you are hoping to use Creed with this guy, he can't order the horsemen around either. I personally think that could be changed in the future, and I hope it is. But maybe Creed doesn't oversee Krieg, and therefore this is a flavour thing. But if you ask me, Imperial troops should be able to take orders from Imperial leaders. So now let's have a look at his active ability, leading the charge. Now, obviously he's going to gain Infiltrate and not trigger that Overwatch on either Calendis, that's quite cool, or Ravas. But the interesting thing to note is, even though they charge in as well, and they're all summoned around Drier, so it's not like any of these horsemen can go off and try and attack anybody else. And as I said, if I quickly move Creed up and use his ability, he doesn't order them to go and kill other people either. Which, as I said, it's a missed opportunity. The other thing to look out for is it will tell you what the pierce ratio currently is. So let's send Creed in and use him to summon in the troops. So 3 have now died, And if we look at Drier's ability, you can see it's gone up to that 21 Pierce ratio. So if you really do want to keep track of how many of your own troops have died, well, Drier can do that for you in a roundabout sort of way. And again, let's just charge him in for some fun. And here, because they're next to other people, one did attack Calendis and one attacked Waivas. But it's not really damage that's going to change the world. So let's quickly pass and do some damage to Drier. And then move back. Okay, our summons go off, but you would have seen that Drier's health has obviously regenerated. And that's great. You know, passive heal is always very good and something Abaddon probably would like himself. The other thing you may have noticed is that when these Death Riders do charge in and they attack a new unit, they do get that additional blast damage, so they are actually doing more damage overall. And that's kind of all there is to this character. So let's have a look at him in closing. Let's start with some positives. Apart from being a very cool character and reflecting one of the newer models that have come to the Imperial Guard on tabletop, this guy has got the Resilient trait. He's a summoner, and summoners are very good, and he also heals himself, so he's certainly going to last a long time on the battlefield. The problem is he's also Imperial, who've got a ton of summoners and resilient characters. So there's nothing really new that he offers. He's certainly not going to be used in any guild raids. He's not really going into any new areas in legendary events. He might shake up things in the faction tournament arena, if he does replace one of the existing characters for the Imperial Guard. And I guess there is a certain place for him on the Guild Wars. I reckon he will be very good on a defensive team. Is that enough to warrant buying the Battle Pass, which he is pretty much locked behind? And I would say if you're a free-to-play player, you're not going to miss out on much. If you're someone who spends a little bit on the game and are on the fence about whether you should spend money on this or not, to be honest, if you don't want to spend on this guy, I don't really blame you. If you're a completionist, then you're going to get this character anyway. I honestly think this guy has a very niche role limited to Guild Wars, which is a shame. I would like to see more interesting characters like this that they've recently released on tabletop come to the game. But I guess not everything can change the meta. So, in closing, don't feel bad if you don't get him. You're not really missing out on much.